Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Iniash Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
And we have a guest with us today.
I'm Jennifer Castelloot.
Hello, Jennifer. We are going to be talking about free-range kids in just a minute. But first, last week we were at a party, and we met a guy who was rationalist adjacent. He was like, I've read a few less wrong posts. I know who Eliezer Yudkowsky is, but what is this rationalism thing really? And the thing is, I never have a good answer for this. Apparently we have someone who says she's not a rationalist, but who has a really good, just extemporaneous, off-the-cuff answer. So, Jennifer, what is rationalism?
I remember that you loved my answer at the time. I don't know that I can reproduce it, but from the observances I have made, I would say it's a bunch of people who made a concerted effort to come up with a systematized way of getting at the truth. They have gone about, to the extent possible, eliminating their own internal biases, figuring out ways to take your thumb off the scale, the way that humans are inclined to sort of want to believe what we want to believe. We're very good at fooling ourselves, and they're trying to objectively attack those ways of problem solving so that you don't fool yourself and you come as close as possible to objective truth.
That's a great answer. I like it.
I ask this because the even more impressive thing for me was that we have for ages had this thing we like to call rational fiction or rationalist fiction, and never really had a good way to describe it. People are like, what is this thing? And I'm like, well, I mean, there's this thing that Eliezer wrote, there's these things that Alexander Wales wrote, like it's hard to say, but there's people who've never heard of rationalism. Blindsight is a very common example. If you go on the r/rational subreddit, which is all about rational fiction, there's a giant description off to the right side. We had an episode on this where we had Daystar Eld and Alexander Wales on, and we asked them, what is rational fiction?
I like my answer, I think, better than what I can remember theirs being, only because mine is short and to the point and not generous.
What is your answer?
Smart characters.
Okay.
Like, just where characters aren't doing things where it's like, come on, man. That's a necessary but not sufficient condition. Or, excuse me, right, yeah, that's necessary but not sufficient for all of the steps you need to meet. But
yeah, there's a lot of fiction with smart characters out there. Jennifer came up with the best answer. Again, yes. I was like, I cannot believe an entire community full of rationalists for years has been dicking around with these multiple paragraph definitions that still don't capture it. And she's just like, duh, guys.
I did not say duh.
I know you didn't say duh, but like it felt like a duh moment. Felt like when you were talking with Rachel and she's like, I would just call the cops.
Right. During a convoluted thought experiment. Yeah. And that's just like, oh yeah, the real answer. Duh. Yeah.
I couldn't. You were the one who said that it was difficult to describe what it was. Mm-hmm. And I said, I think what I said was something like, is it not just fiction that involves people doing rational things? Like rationalist people doing rationalist things. Yeah. And then you wrap that in fiction, and that makes it rationalist fiction?
You said it's a fiction featuring a rationalist as a central character.
That hits the nail squarely on the head, yeah.
It's like, son of a bitch.
And then you went and pointed me towards that r/rationalist definition, and it goes on and on and on. Mm-hmm. It was a little funny that
it would be like asking a Christian what defines Christian fiction, and they go on forever, and it's really just like fiction that centers a Christian as the protagonist, and often they're doing Christian stuff. Yeah.
Oh.
And I think because my thing, I said smart characters, it does just need to be at least a central character, because there's one that I'd count as rational fic that I read back after we're still trying to scratch the itch, Methods of Rationality left for us. And it was Harry Potter and the Natural 20. Mm. And the protagonist is a guy that's like teleported from the D&D universe, and all of his stuff still works that way. Mm-hmm. And everyone else stays canon Harry Potter. Mm-hmm. And so he's like the only one kind of like munchkining the system. But I think it still works as a rational fiction story. Just because for example, salt is really expensive in D&D, and it's free basically here, right? So he is able to get like just churn out experience and stuff like that by doing little hacks that way.
Acting like a rationalist, one might say.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I had to do that. Thank you. Okay. All right, but the actual reason we have invited Jennifer here is because Jennifer has a kid who is now 18 and off in college.
Yeah.
And you raised him in the free-range style, at least partially free-range style of raising children. And I, for one, have a huge bug up my butt about how much public schooling sucks. And how, I don't know, just kids in general are mistreated by society nowadays, and not mistreated necessarily, but we ain't doing them no favors.
And we say invited here. We're all in the same room for the first time in many months.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of when the last time I'd have been in it. The last time that comes to mind is May, but we've probably done at least one since then in real life.
When Alex was over, we all were together with him, but I don't remember.
That
when
was
that
like in the summer, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that was the May one.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
How fun.
Yeah. A lot of the issue that people have with free ranging their kids is like, how the hell do you even do that? Like back in the day, you could just say, get out of the house, and the kids would go and play. And nowadays, that's like, you've basically sentenced your child to death. So how did you manage to do this thing without sentencing your child to death?
We free ranged our son as much as we could. I still think now in retrospect we could have done much more.
Is it okay to say his name on this, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay.
His name's Milo.
That is the name of the protagonist in Harry Potter and the Natural 20.
Oh, cool.
Oh.
Yeah.
Also in the Phantom Toll booth.
Ah.
We get told that a lot. So let's see. So when Milo was very little, I read an article by someone called Lenore Skenazy, and she is in New York City. And way back in like 2008, I think she let her child ride the subway home by himself. He was like 9 years old.
This is the anecdote I've heard about before.
Yes.
And I thought, for some reason, I always had, maybe it was Brian Kaplan talks about this kid in this story, but I don't mean to interject, but this was like going to be the one thing I was going to raise on this point because it's the only thing I've ever heard of. Instead of getting whatever mugged or abducted or whatever people would worry about, no, the kid had an awesome sense of self-accomplishment and agency of like, I'm doing adult stuff, going to, I'm taking the train to school,
Yeah.
Yeah. And it turned out to be like very empowering and not like scary and mean.
It was his idea. He wanted to do it, and she let him do it, and he made it home, and he was all, like you say, full of individualism and empowerment and proud of himself. And so she wrote an article about it that I think was in the New York Times, and then just got the full force of the internet coming down upon her head, telling her that she was a horrible parent and had endangered her child, and nobody could believe that he made it home alive.
And this was 2008?
She let him ride the subway in 2008. I think the original article was 2008. So my son at the time would have been 3.
That was so long ago already.
I know, right? And so it took. I thought about it, but right, he's 3, so that's definitely too young to be letting him roam the streets. But I still filed it away and thought that's a shame. We live in San Francisco, and are we going to have places where we can just like let him run around outside? And so that was just kind of in the back of my head.
Not are we? You live directly next to a beautiful place. To
Yeah,
let
we
him
live
run
in a
outside.
huge city park, McLaren Park, which is like the 3rd biggest park in San Francisco, and it's half of the park is an 18-hole golf course, and the other half of the park is just like a big natural awesome park, and we live like a block away from it. When he was 6, that was the first time we decided we were going to let him go to the park alone, and we had a whole adventure day where we packed him up a backpack and we put snacks in it, and he took a walkie-talkie, and we were nervous, but I know when I was 6 I was like shoved outside all the time. With no cell phone. I probably had a bike. Like I could have been anywhere, and my mom would have had no way. I could have said I'm going somewhere, and if I had seen something shiny, I would have followed a squirrel to the next county. She would have had no way to know.
You're describing my childhood.
Yes, right. And we all did that, and it was pretty much fine. So it did take some bravery, and I was nervous about it. And
How nervous were you?
I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it, but I think I really wasn't nervous for his safety. Mm-hmm. I was nervous that he might do something stupid. I was nervous about him crossing the street. That's legitimate. And I was nervous that I guess he could have hurt himself, but it seemed unlikely. I really did not think he was going to get abducted by strangers, because that really just doesn't happen. I mean, there really are like 100 of those out of, what do we have, 78 million children or something, and 100 stranger abductions a year. I mean, there are many missing children, but they're always people you know.
Yeah.
For reference, I think like 50 people in the U.S. get struck by lightning every year, so
Right?
Your odds are pretty small of your kid getting randomly abducted. If your kid gets taken, it's always by a non-contact parent or an uncle or something.
Yeah, exactly. Your mom's crazy ex-boyfriend or somebody like that. And so I wasn't worried. I really wasn't worried about that. And I am embarrassed. But the thing that I was most worried about is if something happens to him, the world will turn on me. I will get no support. And the entire universe is going to just jump on me and say, you deserved it. You endangered your child. And I was like, I have to push through that. Like, I can't let that be the thing that tells me how to raise my kid. But I was nervous.
It's a legit concern, though. I mean, because people, they'd lose their minds.
They'd lose their minds.
Yeah.
And
over you doing something completely pedestrian and appropriate.
But totally unnecessary, involving risk, and so people can't handle it.
I'm so against that. I think it's very important to be able, and even necessary, to be able to let children take risks and then not die. Learning what risks you can take and that it's appropriate sometimes is a very important life lesson. Otherwise, you're stuck in home, never crossing a street.
Yeah.
There was I would have been between 4 and 6, and apparently I was going to go check the mail. I don't remember any of this. But I do remember seeing for the next decade the bloodstains all over by like the park just down the street because I'd crashed my bike and cut my face and a lot of face blood, and it just stained the concrete there. But apparently a neighbor brought me like home in his arms. He like found me there because I was gonna just go walk 2 houses over and grab the mail, but I apparently took my bike out and just left, and so that freaked my parents out. But yeah, my whole childhood was just, hey, I'm gonna go over to my friend's house and I'll let you know. I'll find a way to get in touch by like 3 to let you know if I'll be home by dinner. And that was the plan.
The thing is, people are amazingly good. If they see a child that needs help, they go and help.
Yeah. There's a Netflix show that I haven't watched, but I'm aware of because they did an SNL sketch on it called Old Enough.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Is this the Japanese one?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
With the little kids, they put like a flag on them, like with a pole, so they're at eye level height, so you can see them, and they get a little list and they go to the store and they're like 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even
and they go
smaller.
shopping. Yeah.
So cute.
They're tiny little kids and they go get their stuff. The SNL sketch was your boyfriend is old enough, and it's sending out boyfriends. The boyfriends have the flag backpack and they're getting stressed out and crying over the list and stuff like that too. So yeah.
And they feel so accomplished. They
I
did a
bet.
thing. They helped the family.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, other than like the prep work of setting up their stuff, because you maybe have to do that a couple times to help get them ready for it, they actually save you trouble of going to the store to grab stuff you actually need.
That too.
Yeah.
They're
So
actually
it's
contributing members of the family.
yeah, it's not like, and I'm helping. It's like, no, you're actually helping. Thank you. Can you grab that? Perfect.
It's another
Yeah.
great reason to have a kid, which is
Free labor.
I think that's an actual problem right now, but we'll get to that in a different episode. But you had a Milo 6 years old with a backpack and a walkie-talkie, and you
Yes.
shoot him out the door.
I shoot him out the door, and he was to check in periodically, and he had to answer the walkie-talkie. So I was sitting at home, and every once in a while I was like, "Hey, Milo, how's it going?" And he would respond, and it was great. And then after about half an hour, it went to radio silence, and he stopped responding. And I thought it's fine. And I waited a few minutes, and I waited a few more minutes, and then I cracked, and I was like, I can't. So I went to the park, and I was driving around kind of trying, and I thought I spotted him in the distance. So I parked and I walked in, and he was doing exactly what I had hoped, which was just like sitting there hitting a tree with a stick, I think, having a great time. And saw me and was like, "Oh, hey, Mom, what are you doing here?" I was like, "Well, you stopped answering the walkie-talkie." And he had put it down somewhere. He was like, "Oh, yeah, it's in my backpack, which is by a different tree somewhere." And so we found the backpack. We found the walkie-talkie. He got a little talking to. And my heart had been pounding. I was walking when I drove. There's a parking lot where all the people in the park are, I'm still embarrassed, but I walked past all those cars, and I thought, Jennifer, there is no way that anybody has abducted your child. Nobody. It doesn't happen. You would have a better chance at winning the lottery.
You resisted the temptation to look in the back seats of all the cars.
To take photographs of the license plates. I was like, I could photograph all of these license plates just so I can tell. And I was like, you're being ridiculous, but I could feel it. And yeah, he was 100% fine. And then he said, "How'd you get here?" I said, "I drove." He said, "Okay, can I have a ride home?" I said, "No, you have to get yourself home." So I left him there, and he got lost, and he couldn't figure out how to get home. And he said he asked some men playing Frisbee, and they said, "Where's your mom?" And he said she left me here and told me I had to find my own way home. But like,
At least
I
these
don't
weren't
know.
Twitter activists. they were men playing frisbees. So.
Some period of time later, not that long, he rang the bell and he made it home, and he still remembers it. It was great. It took me a while to like calm down and be fine. And I did get telling his friends' parents that story a lot of heat. Like, they really were not joking around. I got a lot of judgment and a lot of like 6 years old is too young, and a lot of the best I got was like some silent head shaking without too much verbal judgment, but not one single person said like, "Wow, great, your kid probably feels independent. Good job being brave." Like, nobody was on board for that.
Your kid got a better experience than our kids have, and probably will.
So it took us several more years. Let's see, now they're 9. And at that point, we finally got 2 other families on board to say, during the summer, we're going to give these kids a week to free range the city. So this Lenore Skenazy's movement that she started after this whole incident with her child, she started this thing called Free Range Kids, and she's like written a book and has a blog, and you can go find out. I mean, she.
What happened with her? Did she like lose her job or anything?
No, I don't think so. I think she just took a lot of heat and then doubled down on trying to get people to lay off their kids a little bit and be less helicopter.
This was that window where the internet would give you tons of shit, but right before the internet would get you fired.
Okay.
Yes,
So.
yes, I think it actually really was.
And I think this is really important because, like, I know some people with new young kids, and I try to tell them things like don't send them to school, but they're like, what am I going to do? Lock them up in home? That's a hard question to answer. And this is the kind of thing they should do, where the kids can learn and experience life and do things. And you just don't know how to do it, right? It's like, what are my options? Like, I literally have no game plan for what to do if they aren't going to school. And so you have a game plan that we are bringing to the people.
We tried to make a game plan. So it's particularly horrible. I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country, but in San Francisco, if you have parents who are working, school gets out in the summer, and then what do you do with your kid? Because nobody just, like, when we were kids, you just
go out.
didn't go to school. But now you can't just leave them home, and you can't just set them free. So they all go to camps. And camps are usually 1 week long, and it's this like flurry of weird activity that parents do in February, trying to sign your kid up for like 1 week of sewing camp and 1 week of maybe outdoor camp and 1 week of swim camp and 1 week of this camp, and then you got to piece together this whole summer. Wow. It's expensive. The kids have fun and it's nice, but it's crazy that it takes a lot of work, and I'm just so jealous of my mom, who was just like, it's the last day of school. Keep yourself busy until the first day of school. That was like, that's literally all she had to do.
A lot of work and a ton of money. The camp has got to be at least $100 per kid per week, right?
Oh, more than that.
Yeah.
If you can get $100 a week camp, you are good. I've seen them as bad as like $1,200, and like the cheap ones that are run by the city, we were pleased when we could get one that was like $2, but that was like that was a bargain.
Yeah.
So we're doing this, trying to like patch up his summers, and he was having a great time. I don't feel like he suffered, but we finally got 2 other families on board, and they each had 2 kids. So we had 3 9-year-olds and 2 7-year-olds. We got them all together, and the parents had like several meetings about what we're going to do. And we called it Camp Dorkaround, because they were just dorking around, because that's what we did when we were little. And we gave them 1 phone, and we gave them each $10 a day. And we said, we're going to just kick you out of the house, and you can't come back home for at least 6 hours. Here's a map of the zone that you should try to stay inside. We have a whole like official list of rules about never getting on a bus or in a car. You have to go everywhere on foot. They didn't have bikes. There's plenty of like commercial corridors and places for them to eat, and like 3 or 4 different playgrounds they could go to within that map.
How big was it?
It was probably, I don't know, if I had to guess, I would say it was a square that was about half a mile on a side.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe half a mile, 3/4 of a mile on a side. It was a pretty big room to roam, and it had that whole giant park I was talking about, and another sizable park, and then another little city playground, and like 8 or 9 different taco places and restaurants.
I'm trying to map this timeline to like technology. So this would have been roughly 2013-ish.
2013-ish, yeah.
So
2014, I think.
did they get
15.
a paper map, or did they get like a iPhone with like the downloaded GPS map?
No, they didn't have any smartphones. They had 1 flip phone, and they had paper maps. They each got a copy of the paper map, and the paper map had all of the adults' phone numbers on it. We had 1 adult on duty every day who would be holding the phone, and like it was like being like an on-call, the person to make sure you could get the call. They could do whatever they wanted with their $10. We live in San Francisco, so like a burrito is going to cost you $8.50.
Yeah.
So they did that for a couple of days, and then they realized all kinds of great lessons. Like they could pool their money together, and for like 1/3 of their money, they could buy 1 crappy pizza, and then they would have the rest of the money to just buy candy and ice cream. So there's like economic lessons they're learning. We talked to them about sticking together. That one we could have maybe loosened up a little bit on, but we were so hardcore about you have to stay together. And then every once in a while, one of the kids would just be a butt and say like, all the other kids are like, we're going to go do this. And then one kid would be like, I'm not going. And then they had to stay together. So we could have done some more work about that. But they, in general, I think almost the very first day, one of them got hurt. And she fell off a play structure and hurt her toe. And we got a call, and they executed flawlessly. And somebody called, and they said, she's hurt. I could hear her crying in the background. I said, where are you? They said, we're at this particular park. So I hopped in the car, and I was there in 4 minutes. One of them was like sitting with her, giving her hugs because she was sad. And like 2 of them were like on the corner waiting for me to flag me in to tell me where she was. And they did everything perfectly.
What happened with the girl with the hurt toe?
I pulled her out. I left the other kids at the park. I took her home, got her cleaned up, gave her a Band-Aid, gave her like an ice cream or something, and then said, "Do you want to sit here until everybody else comes home? You can like watch TV or whatever." And she said, "No, I want to go back to the park. I want to go back where the kids are, so put me back in." So I drove her back and dropped her back in, and they were all like, "Yay, she's back." It was flawless, and we were so proud and relieved because I think I cannot give enough props to the other two families who said okay, because we asked a lot of families and they were like, absolutely not. We are not letting our 7 and 9-year-olds roam around. And they were almost 10, almost 8 and almost 10. But we just got so many hard no's. That is crazy from people. And so I'm still grateful to these other people who said yes. And as far as we know, nothing bad ever happened to them. The more time went by, the more weeks we were like, within a couple of years, fast forward, and we're like, we're not paying ever for another camp again. You guys can just dork around the whole summer because we're done with that. I really believe that there are parents in San Francisco whose kids are like 16 years old and they've never been allowed to just navigate the world. And I don't know what happens when those kids get turned loose and are actually responsible for everything, because you need practice and you need room to screw up, and you need some space to be able to like lie to your parents and say, I'm going to this place, but you actually sneak and go to the other place. I don't want to encourage it, but like if you live a life where you can never do that once, then what happens?
I wonder about that with kids. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No.
I was just thinking, because that was our go-to move when I was a teenager. Would be like, hey, I'm going to stay at his house, and he'd tell his parents he's going to stay at my house, and we would just spend the entire night running around the town,
having the best time.
Yeah, the best time. One time we snuck into a friend's treehouse because it was cold, and we slept in it because it was freezing. I'm trying to think of like now, every kid's got a smartphone, and when you described your 6-year-old going to the park, what I think I would have done, I would have probably stealthily followed. And they like, yep, you're going slowly, you'll be fine, enjoy it, you're independent. But I would have been secretly, nearby just to keep an eye on things, because I'm too neurotic that way.
See Steven in the bushes with his ghillie suit.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, so I've got a cat. She doesn't wear a collar because she never leaves the house. And we don't have many here because we're next to a main drag. But our last place, there were like 3 neighborhood cats, and I knew that the other place because they jumped through open windows to go inside. And I could not fathom doing that. I would lose my shit just wondering where my cat is if and that's not even my child, right? She's our kid, but I realize it's somehow people have stronger attachments to their kids than I do to my cat. But
maybe.
My mom described when I was she would pick us up from school when I was in elementary school. There were residential fences on either side, and then this one path that kind of came down this hill, and that led straight to the school, and we would come down that. And she told me when I was like in my 20s that she just sit down there and have panic attacks basically every day, thinking today's going to be the day that they're not going to come down. And so I think I inherited some of that neuroticism, but it's not slowing me down too much. But I guess. But
you have to. They're not Sims. Like the Sim characters from The Sims. They need to be able to navigate life on their own.
Oh, yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. And my mom put up with it despite the fact that she's sitting there feeling like she's going to die every day in the car.
Yeah.
Knowing that, she can't walk to the school and pick us up, at the classroom or whatever, right?
It is bizarre to think a lot of kids up through their late teens live in basically a panopticon. Well, I was told as a kid, God is always watching you.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And I believed it. But now, someone is always watching you.
That's where I was going with this. Thanks for reminding me, is that now kids have smartphones, and they've always had them. Mm-hmm. And so now it'd be way harder to lie to your parents what you're going to be unless you're going to stash your phone somewhere.
Which they absolutely do. Kids are super smart, and they for sure will go to the library and then ditch that phone behind the book and go out and do whatever. I mean, they're like, good luck outsmarting a kid.
I'm sure. I guess I'd think of something, but I guess the stay out all night thing would be harder to pull off, unless each friend were to actually visit their friend's house and leave their phone at the. Actually, that sounds like something we'd do. Yeah. All right, problem solved. But yeah,
take notes, kids.
Yeah.
I mean, you really can't. It's been funny to watch, like in schools, they try to do whatever they can do to make the kids not do their phones in the classroom. And at one point, they had school issued laptops or iPads or something, and they had tried their very hardest to shut it all down, so that they can't have the kids using the technology, and you can only get on the school Wi-Fi, and like you can't put apps on it, and just like everything they could do. And the kids realized that they were allowed to have Google Docs, and so they would just like make Google Docs and then have all their conversations in the chat window of the Google Docs. Like you can't stop them. You can't stop them. But we did go through this thing with our son and like chipping him. We like shorthand called it chipping your kid, because when they have a cell phone now, I can look and I can see where he is at all times, right?
Yeah.
See, I would literally chip my kid. Like that episode of Black Mirror, but a little less invasive.
And we really tried not to. And we did have the capability, I think, most of the time to find Milo if we had to, but we promised him that we wouldn't. And he believed us and we were telling the truth. So there's like a trust element there that not everyone has with their kid. And at first we were a little bit, I don't know. I was a little bit judgy at people who did all the time, like, where's my kid? Where's my kid? Where's my kid? Because I really did think it was important to be able to like have some time as a kid to sneak off and have no one breathing down your neck. Mm-hmm. The exception being, we did have a friend who was divorced, and the kid went back and forth between the two parents. And that friend was like, oh, this is easy for you guys to say because you've decided this together. And so if your kid goes off and something happens, like, you guys are going to share that responsibility. But if my kid goes off and I don't know where he is and I lose him, that happened on my watch. And it's not going to be a cooperative experience. And so I need to know where that kid is at all the time. And I eased up a little bit from my hard stance of like, just stop following your children everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's a hard temptation to overcome when you have the really easy ability to just know where they are. Yeah. But I beg of you to try to let them sneak around a little bit.
Yeah. And in that person's case too, you know, if it was a non-amicable custody thing, that could be the ammunition that the other parent used to keep the kid. And so it's like, yeah, all right, I'm going to, you know, hawkishly watch this kid the entire time they're in my care. But so I'm trying to think of, if you mentioned when your son got like his first smartphone.
Mm-hmm. How old was he?
Yeah.
I think he was 10. I think he was 10. The first time we gave him like a really old, they had neutered phones for a while that couldn't really do much. And it was a big thing with the parents. Like, at what point do you give them a smartphone? Because once you give it to them, you can't take it back, and you lose them, and the amount of time that he spends doing smartphone things. And then the point is to get them outside by a tree. Right. And all they do is go sit by the tree and look at their phones. Yeah. So it is a real thing.
So he had a smartphone for the later Camp Dorkarounds.
Yeah.
How did that go?
It was fine. I think they probably spent a little bit too much time watching YouTube videos, but at least they were outside in the sunshine, and it was okay.
Yeah, see, at least I was outside. I had a Game Boy Pocket that we'd climb into my friend's tree that had like this cool branch that would go horizontally over this ditch, and you can kind of lean back against this other branch and just sit there and play Game Boy outside. You know, at least we're outdoors.
At least you were outdoors, getting some fresh air. You had to climb up there.
Yeah. That was fun. I'm trying to think of modern objections that people would have, because I feel like
the main objection is that you're putting your kid at risk, right?
Well, but it hasn't and remind me of the person's name who did this in 2008.
Lenore Skenazy.
Yeah, hasn't the kind of free range kids movement had enough time to do some pushback where people are letting up on that a bit, or not?
I don't know. I mean, my son's 18 now, and so I don't know what the current conditions are, but I do occasionally talk to parents of younger kids, and when I say stuff like, when are you going to let him go outside and roam free, all I get is a lot of, not today. You know, and sort of everybody is like, yeah, I guess we're going to have to eventually, and it is scary. The most disappointing part, I think, is that I feel like I hang around with some pretty informed parents, and they still really seem to be committed to this idea that everything is danger.
And it's not.
And it's really not. And we've always told most people are honest. Most people are going to want to help a kid. Yeah.
If there's a problem, go to an adult.
And we usually say, try to find a parent. Like, if you see anybody with a kid or pushing a stroller, they're going to be extra inclined to help you out. But if you don't see one, then just go find an adult. You know, he lives in the city, so he knows not to go find a schizophrenic-looking homeless person.
Right.
But any other adult is going to want to try to help you out.
You mentioned that he had you guys were able to trust each other on, like, yes, we can find you on your phone, but we won't. Mm-hmm. That level of trust was established because since age 6, you know, he'd been trusted to do his own thing, and it worked out well. There was another time when it's one of my earliest memories. So 3 or 4, we were visiting my great grandparents in the middle of the small town in Iowa. It's a 13-hour drive. I got out of the car, saw a bunny, and just went right after it before my parents even got out of the car, and I was lost, you know, immediately. And I have the impression of the memory of getting out and like just standing in the street and flagging down a police officer because there was a car. And like, where are you from? I'm like, Fort Collins, Colorado. And this is a town of like 1,000 people. He's like, well, who are you here visiting? And the reason that I'm confused about how old I was is because if I hadn't gone in the house yet, my remembering my grandparents' names would have come from the previous visit. In any case, I was like, no, it's Jerry Gilmore. And he's like, oh, okay, we're going to try this one. He's like talking to the dispatcher, and it was the right one first. And again, because there's only, whatever, I guess 2 Gilmores in town or something. But apparently every time they saw that cop for the next 30 years, they'd, hey, Fort Collins, Colorado. But yeah, in general, people are helpful and people are nice. I've gone out of my way to like stop people, to help people who have like stalled cars or whatever.
Yeah.
And you mentioned like the level of like helplessness that comes with not ever running into trouble, because that does happen. If you're out doing stuff, whatever, your bike chain falls off or your car shuts down or whatever.
And if you've never had any experience interacting with the world, you just you clam up. Like, what do I do? I mean, maybe I call AAA or something. I need to go through institutions because I don't know how to interact with other humans.
Yeah, there's something I knew in college, and I know her. Well, we went to all of our primary school and stuff together, but in college, like her car died or something when she was driving it. She's telling me about this, and then I was like, well, how'd you get home? It's, oh, my dad went and picked it up, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like it was drivable? She's like, yeah, apparently. And I was like, you didn't try just turning it back on?
Oh my god.
And I get like when your car dies, it's scary, but I had driven really shitty cars. Like I had one that I had to put into neutral as I was approaching stoplights because the tremor when it was sitting at throttle and in drive would just kill it if it was stopped. So I mean, not everyone should drive a car that crappy, but it's like, yeah, if it turns off, try turning it back on.
Mm-hmm.
But that level of like, well, I don't want to touch it in case it's dangerous wasn't available as an option for her.
And I mean, I know it's scary to the parents, but like, this is another reason people need to learn to take risks, have a little courage. It teaches you that the world isn't going to destroy you, and that sometimes taking a little bit of risk is good, both for you and your kid. Maybe if you see a slippery rope bridge, go and walk over it, just so that you can say that you did, and you know that there's some level of competence and risk that's worth taking. It'll be scary. Do it anyway. Turns out it's not that bad. Real courage is doing things even though they are scary.
It's good practice if you have like miniature things, like you could take your kid to the mall.
Steps.
We took Marla to Target, and like when he was really little, he wanted to stay where the toys were and just like look at the toys, and we wanted to get whatever we came to Target to get, and so the first couple times we would be like, all right, we're gonna leave you here in the toy section, but we're not going to leave the Target without you, and you're not going to leave the Target without us. Yeah. And the first time, sure enough, over the loudspeaker, Jennifer Castellano, please come collect your child. And he had gone to the bathroom, asked a Target person where the bathroom was, and then come out of the bathroom, and then like, I don't know where the toys are anymore. And so he just found, I was like, they all wear red. Yeah. And they will all help you. And so he went, and they called us over the loudspeaker. We're like, that's exactly how you do it. Yeah. So you can practice with small, low-stakes things before you actually have to turn your kid out loose on the town.
I don't remember this because it was 4 years old, but I'm told by my parents every now and then, and I swear they have gotten a little bit more safety-pilled because now they think this is ridiculous. When they were moving to America from Germany, they had at that point accumulated a few things, so they had some luggage. And we end up in the airport. I'm 4, my little sister is 2. They have some luggage. They need to go somewhere else briefly. I don't know what the deal is, why they had to leave for a bit. They're like, what the hell do we do with all this luggage? We can't haul back and forth. They're like, you know what? We're leaving it right here. Inyas, sister, watch the luggage. And so they leave. And they come back like a half hour later and everything's fine. And nowadays, my mom is like, I can't believe we did. How could we do that? You were 4. What were you going to do if someone tried to take the luggage? I'm like, obviously I would say, hey, this guy isn't my parents and he's taking the luggage, and everyone around would come and jump him because you're in a crowded airport. It's not that big a deal. You just need someone to sit there and watch the luggage and yell if someone else tries to take it.
A few years ago, we went to Tanzania. We're touring around, and it was amazing. And every once in a while, out of our little Jeep window, in the far distance, in the middle of nowhere, you could see little boys herding sheep and cows. And our tour guide was like,
I thought you said hurting.
Herding them. No, HERD.
Shepherding.
Yeah. Shepherding.
Yeah.
And our tour guide said, yeah, when you turn 8 or 9, your family, your village, your unit, your community unit will say, like, today is your day to take these 9 sheep, 3 miles out to wherever to get water and back again. So you're responsible for this like enormously valuable resource of your community by yourself. We literally would see like cheetahs and lions. We were in the middle of freaking Tanzania, and they have a long sharp stick and a canteen. Be home before dark and have all the sheep with you when you come back. And poor Milo was like never again was I going to hear a word about anything. Like, meanwhile, I'm like, My Little Prince kid's like, it's hot in the airport. Will you carry my sweatshirt? And we were like, he was so overhearing about those goat kids. But I was like, do I need to remind you about the goat kids? But when you see that, you're like, the kids can do anything, and we literally won't let them cross the street. We have to solve this, or we're gonna be in trouble when they're in charge, because they're not gonna know how to do anything.
I do wonder how a 9-year-old would fend off a cheetah with nothing but a sharp stick.
Evidently, it doesn't happen, because if it was a problem, they wouldn't do it.
I mean, I guess once in a while you'd lose a sheep, and it's like, yeah, either that or me, and I let it take the sheep, and it preferred the sheep because it was bigger, so you're welcome.
Predators, I mean, this happens in human society too. Predators always go for the weak things because they don't want to get hurt. Like, if you get hurt once every week trying to get your food, eventually you're limping around and you can't catch food anymore because you're all crippled. Yeah, so
the kid looks like an easier catch, but
yeah,
you're used to catching
there with
sheep
a big stick. Maybe you know that humans got the sticks and sometimes guns or whatever, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to go over there to that crippled little gazelle. Leave the sheep alone. And yeah, it's the same thing. That's why, like, if someone's being, shitty, you just yell at them. You put up a bit of a fight and resistance. And they're like, okay, I'm gonna go pick on someone who's weaker because I don't want to get hurt if I want to keep doing this shit. I don't know. That brought me down a little bit. I'm gonna skip forward now. As they got older, did the territory get any bigger?
Yes, and I think eventually we let them take the bus. I don't remember exactly now the timeline because it wasn't. It just sort of like faded into. It felt more natural and we were less nervous about it. And of course, by the end of the time when they were in middle and high school, they were taking the bus all over the place half the time to get to school. So
it was like exposure therapy for you as the adults.
Yes.
Even. Yeah.
Yes. Every time they could solve a problem and come home, and then we felt better about letting them go back out the next day, and they had to like solve their own conflicts. And
I mean, a large part of your job as a parent is making adults that can be functional.
Yeah.
And you can't do that unless you are doing these things and letting them practice being functional and navigate the world.
And it is scary. It is scary.
It's literally shirking your duty as a parent if you coddle them and protect them the whole time. They aren't being raised into adults.
I think I understand the impulse to where it's hard not to, right? Because it's like,
Yeah, it takes a little bit of courage.
Yeah.
Don't be a coward.
Well, a little or a lot. I mean,
I think really so many adults feel like they themselves are under threat when they walk around in the city. So they feel like the threats are real. So the sort of like facing myself down, being like, Jen, this is ridiculous. This is like, he's going to be fine. Yeah. I don't feel unsafe when I walk down the street. And I think if I did, then of course I'm not going to let my kid in that environment. I mean,
maybe they shouldn't let drug-addled crazy people just roam the streets.
Well, and, depending on your neighborhood, this is, the advice will vary too, right? So, some neighborhoods, it's like, don't go outside, and that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
So other than the stubbed toe on the first week of whatever free-range camp, was that the only bad incident that ever happened over the years?
I don't remember any other bad incidents. I think there might have been some lost money one day. Somebody came home and had lost their money, but they had figured it out.
Like lost it as in dropped it, or lost it as in someone took it?
No, lost it as in dropped it.
I mean,
I think
happens.
there might have been a lost phone. Milo never lost his phone, but I do remember a couple times kids... before they were smartphones, like today, they would know in 2 seconds, like any of us would. We wouldn't get very far without our phones. But there were a couple times when phones got put down and left behind. So there were some, but nothing dangerous, and certainly no one ever tried to hurt them. Nobody ever tried to mess with them. The worst messing withs they got were people saying, "Where are your parents?" And they were all together, and they said, we're allowed to be outside. We told them, you have to be nice and respectful to everyone you meet, but you stand your ground and you tell them we are allowed to be outside. Our parents know we're outside, and it's okay. That's awesome. And nobody ever came for us. We weren't sure about the legality. People asked us, like, is it legal? Like, at what age is it legal to just let your kid go outside? Because surely it couldn't be 2. Is it 3? Is it 5? We never looked it up, so I still don't know.
That's a strange question to even ask. Like, when is it legal to let a child leave the home? Like... Why would anyone just assume default that there's a law that says your child cannot leave the home until they're at a certain age? That shouldn't be.
2 makes sense.
Yeah, 2 makes sense.
Because there are
there's like child negligence, right?
I was gonna say there is some measure for like the state imposing endangerment laws for children, right? It's like we're not gonna let you teach them how to cook French fries when they're 2 years old, unattended, stuff like that.
I mean, there's a lot of kids that just play with firecrackers.
Oh yeah, I mean the number of lots of things turns out are flammable around the house, and I found all of them. But
Your poor parents.
oh yeah, they endured a lot. Dryer lint, it turns out.
Good kid.
Dryer lint. People save that on purpose to start campfires with.
Yeah, I thought that when I discovered how flammable it was.
How did you discover how flammable it was?
I was probably just looking for shit to burn and cleaned out the dryer or something. And you could put like body spray in your hand and set it on fire, and it wouldn't be too hot.
Right.
And then I remember once, like, my mom came in and I slapped it to put the fire out, and it splashed.
Mm.
But by the time the splash had gone away from my hand, it already burned up. It didn't like catch anything on fire, but there was no hiding what I was doing, and so that was a talking to. But I wonder, has he told you any stories about like any of the stuff they got up to that he definitely didn't tell you at the time, or?
No, I think they really didn't get up to many shenanigans. They were really young. Like, all of the whatever smoking weed in the park and stuff like that went down was much older. So they didn't, as far as I know, they didn't try to steal anything from a store, which seems like, I think when I was in middle school, I tried to steal a candy bar. They were being pretty good citizens, and they got in fights with each other. But mostly they just wanted to.
And that teaches interpersonal conflict resolution.
Yeah, they did. They did well. They'd come home complaining about how one or another of them had been a jerk.
But they all understood the steadfast rule of you guys have to stick together, which
together.
means that, look, whether or not we like it or not, we have to work this out. And that is actually super valuable.
Yeah.
They snitched each other out a couple times. I remember once they had to go this long way around something. I don't remember what it was, but two of them said, this is stupid, and if we hop this fence, we can cut like 10 minutes off this, and so we want to take the shortcut. And the other one said, no, we're going to take the long way because we don't want to hop the fence. And
I like
they did
those
it.
two.
They split up. And so then the other three came home, and they each accused the other ones of not sticking together, but they had all been together, like they had not been together for like 10 minutes.
And it's hard to say which one, if three of them took the shortcut and one of them was like, I'm not breaking the law, which one gets in trouble? The one who defected from the group, or the one who didn't trespass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't think we had unity on that within the parents either. So
What side were you on?
I'm on Team Shortcut.
Yeah.
There was this cool green, like, this area behind a bunch of houses I think they're called green belts, but it would, like kind of like natural areas where there aren't roads or really even paths, and you could take one. There was a Safeway a couple miles away, and you could either walk all the way around to like the street, and it's seriously like a half-mile detour on foot, or there was a fence with a person-sized hole in it that you could easily just walk through, and it was someone's fence, but it was only one. You didn't have to go through their yard.
Right.
And we used that all the time. I did feel bad when they eventually fixed it, and the guy I was with kicked in a new hole, but then the hole was back, and we could keep using that.
Right,
so.
yeah.
But I never vandalized like that, but I was present to vandalism.
Right.
So
I feel like the people who won't take a shortcut like that are the same people that stay sitting at red left turn arrows at 2 a.m. when there's no one around. Like, that's so dumb. You're burning your own life. You're burning fuel. Just turn.
See,
The signs are there to serve you, not the other way around.
I think about that every time I roll a stop sign or whatever in the middle of the night. Like a red light, I'm always worried that, like, some cop's gonna be like, all right, I can write this kid a $200 ticket. But when I roll a stop sign, I always have this imagined conversation in my head with the police officer who hypothetically pulls me over. And I'm like, what is the purpose of the stop sign? It's so that I have enough time to take attention of everything around me that make sure it's safe to proceed, right? I did that.
Yeah.
I did that.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to stop to do it. Like, so as long as you're willing to tell me, this ticket is stupid, then go ahead and write it. But we both know I didn't do anything wrong. Other than the penalty. I see your point is received, but I do wait at red lights in the middle of the night because I don't want to get random tickets. But
Stop being a coward.
Start running red lights.
So what was the hardest part of organizing this whole Camp Dorkaround?
I think it was just getting people on board for like how young is too young, and getting all of us collectively past the worry, like just getting more people on board. Once we had 2 more families on board, we all sat there together and navigated our varying risk levels of acceptance. That really was the hardest part. And then after that, the kids did great. And then, like, as other people in our circles saw that it was happening, probably by the 3rd summer that we did it, we had, many more kids and people were much more relaxed. And really, looking back on it, I'm pretty proud of it. I really feel like indirectly there are a couple dozen kids in San Francisco who got a lot more freedom a lot sooner than they would have because they were exposed and with a little bit of pressure to be like, you can't be keeping your kid indoors, and I'm putting my own kid on the line to throw down for kid freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe some parents got a little bit bullied into it, and I don't care. I'm glad.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish it was a larger sample size, but like, it'd be fun to see because the oldest in that cohort is now 18, but give another 5 or so years once they're out of college or whatever, and see their life outcomes and maybe even just like their general life satisfaction.
Yeah.
And I imagine it'll be higher.
Can
just
you imagine? You'd have to be, once you finally get out into the world, just kind of scared, anxious, cooped up in your house, not wanting to risk anything if you hadn't had anything like that.
I think by high school, at least in the city, I think by high school, most of them have some degree of freedom because
Okay.
there's like all the high school kids in San Francisco are smoking weed and are up to nonsense, and like they're finding some kind of time to do it. And so they do eventually get some degree of freedom, but there's still so many of them who I know personally who would, their parents are just tracking them all the time. And so they would say, like, I don't want you at this particular park because I know you go there to smoke weed. And, like, every day they're just obsessively, where are you, where are you, where are you, where are you? So they do get a little bit of freedom, but they don't really get a chance to not be accountable and to just, like, walk in the world alone. And I loved when I was a kid just being like, nobody knows where I am. Nobody knows where I am right now. I barely get that now as an adult.
Right.
see. I didn't try weed until because I was a nerd. I didn't smoke until after I finished high school, but I missed out.
Me either.
Until like 26.
I missed out
27.
on lots of opportunities to hang out with my friends. But
All my friends were just as nerdy as me. None of us did. One of them, this is the greatest thing. One of them had a mom who, like, every now and then did weed, right? And again, stone cold nerd, just like I am. But
that's displayed by the fact that you said did weed, which is perfect.
anyways, his mom was also nerdy. Like, I had an engineering job, but every now and then she partook of the herb.
Yeah. I've been known to enjoy the devil's lettuce from time to time myself. Yes.
But she told him when they turned 14, 15 maybe, she was like, look, if you want weed, I know high school kids like to smoke weed. If you want any weed, come to me. I know places to get the good, clean stuff. You won't get anything adulterated with, other stuff. So I don't want to worry about you taking dirty weed. And he said that took all the magic out of it for him. He was just like, if my mom's giving me weed, what's even the point?
That's not sexy.
Maybe that was the 3-dimensional chess move, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Could have been it.
If this is condoned, then yeah, what's even the point? Let me go find some, overpriced crap, and then I'll try that and realize that she was right.
If the hardest part was getting the 2 other families,
Yeah.
how long did that take? And how would people do that nowadays? What would be a way to go about finding another family and starting up a camp Dorkaround of your own?
I think you have to have the determination to say I would like to do it for sure, and then just to start collecting people. I mean, I can't remember.
Like, how did you do it?
Oh, well, we had so we only have the one child, and we very intentionally, because we don't live near any of the grandparents or anything. When he was a baby, we started collecting like a group of families to be like a sort of pseudo village, right? It takes a village. So when he was in preschool, we hooked up with maybe, I don't know, 10 other families who all had kids the same age, and tried to make this like extended kind of a family where he now has, I don't know, 12 or 15 kids that he can't remember not knowing. He's known them his whole life. We've gone on like camping trips together. We never paid for babysitters because we always just swapped babysitting for each other's kids. We've
Awesome.
gone on ski trips and stuff, and we go to Thanksgiving at each other's houses. And so it sort of just like feels a little bit like cousins and family. He's not really tight with a lot of them now, but they still, I know they're going to be in touch their whole lives, and they'll be able to like look back on childhood memories together. So those were the families that we were like, okay, you guys all of our kids are the exact same age. Is it time to start letting them loose on the city? And like when they were 8, everybody was like, hell no. And when they were 9, we're like, how about now? And they were like, hell no. And finally, we finally got 2 of them to be like, okay, we'll try. Okay. So we just kept asking around to the parents of the kids that we knew and trusted. We knew that those kids were not complete knuckleheads. And we just got lucky that we found 2. And then once we had that, then other people could see. They couldn't deny it, right? Like, our kids have been doing this and they're fine. Yeah. And there was a little bit of like, okay, so are you going to keep your kid locked up under lock and key?
So a bit of it was knowing these people already and having some trust.
And having some trust, yeah.
Okay.
I think it would have been weird to do with complete strangers, but I still might have done it if I would have thought that was the only way to get him out of the house and get him some freedom.
Yeah. I don't know
with
if
a bit of
there's
freedom.
a resource online for people to like get in touch with other parents in their area that want to do this kind of thing.
If there is, I would certainly try freerangekids.org or
Okay.
look up Free Range Kids. There. I know she wrote a book, and at the time, it's probably at least 10 years old now, but I know that she was pretty committed to saying like we need to solve this problem, and she had some suggestions that I don't know what they were, but I would go. Lenore's the one who thought of it. It wasn't me. I was just trying to copy her.
Yeah. Well, if any listeners have a recommendation, let us know. And if not, I don't know. We'll try to find something and maybe add a link in the show notes.
There's community subreddits for every city.
Yeah, but
you know,
yeah,
I
that's
mean, it'd be like you said. The interesting thing would be like whatever, trying to find a Facebook group run by a stranger. Be like, hey, you want your kids to run around unattended? Like that's not
Oh,
going to
you know
fly
what?
for
Try
anybody.
homeschoolers.
yeah.
Homeschoolers are going to be a lot more into that, so maybe you could hook up with some homeschoolers because they are in general more free-rangey.
Homeschoolers, unschoolers,
Yeah.
yeah. Maybe even just people who send their kids to non-traditional schools like the Montessori or the what is the one that Wes really likes? Sudbury schools.
See, I've never heard of that.
They're very much the kind of school that I think is the ideal kind of school where you have a lot of things that kids can learn and do there and like a couple adults to guide them and answer questions, but they aren't required to do anything. They just go there and explore and learn on their own if they want.
That might be my coworker was doing some sort of, and it sounded way beyond what Montessori schools sound like. So maybe it was this, and his daughter's 9 now, and they're just transitioning out to a more traditional, but not like straight up regular school.
Mm-hmm.
I think mainly because it was so like a little too directionless, and like they needed some more structure. But the kid's thriving. I mean, I got to think, you know, with parents that attentive and that involved in the positive direction. You know, there are other versions of being too involved as a parent, but
Right.
I keep getting invites. I don't know who got my email for it, but to get what's it, next door,
Yeah.
which I'm not going to join because that sounds awful. It's just people complaining about loud dogs or whatever. And but there is a neighborhood group chat that like I'm on WhatsApp, which I downloaded the app for that to do.
Cool.
And so I guess if any of us had kids and wanted to do that, that'd be an option. But yeah, I mean, network. My parents knew my friends' parents. You know, you're mentioning like how helpless kids would be or whatever if you know raised under the heaviest security blanket in the world. And I thought maybe you're being uncharitable, so I was trying to think of examples of you know teenage-ish age kids that I know. Unfortunately, my oldest niece is like 5, so I got to give her like a decade. But one of my wife's coworkers has 2 kids. I think they're 13 and 15 or something, maybe 16. She's constantly having to leave work to answer the phone because the kids are blowing up her phone. You know, the 16-year-old like needs money for not lunch money, something more stupid. It was like that expensive Korean tea.
Boba?
Boba, yeah. Because I remember that story sending out. Like he called her over and over, wanted $20 for boba. And it's like, first of all, $20. Second of all, figure this shit out, man. Are you kidding me? I got a job. And she leaves work 3 or 4 days a week to go pick them up from school. And I'm like, why is no one else carpooling to get these kids home? And why is it always her thing? And I think she's doing the like being too careful with the kids sort of thing. I get not having them take a lift home or whatever, because that'd probably be more expensive and more of an imposition. But that's my roundabout way of saying I was trying to think of counterexamples and wondering if you were being too uncharitable. And I actually don't. I think maybe you aren't. I think that there is a level of helplessness of like, I ran out of money. You know, let me just bug my mom over and over, even though she has a job that like she needs to actually keep doing in order to keep giving me money for boba tea.
If you ran out of money, maybe you should have budgeted better that day.
Yeah, you'd think. Also, you're 16. Like you can get money.
Yeah.
Right.
We just were at a place where a 16-year-old was giving us a tour, and it was adorable. He was really good.
I had some call center job when I was like 14. I was only there for a few days because the job sucked.
Yeah.
But I had like an actual paycheck at the end of it that I had to like take to the bank and everything. Because I remember I was feeling really confused. We had that episode a year or two ago about young adults versus children, etc. And you were like, kids can't get jobs till they're 16 or something. I'm like, I know I had a job in junior high.
For sure, I got my first work permit at 14. I don't know what the situation is now, but I'm certain I've been working since I was 14 legally.
Did I get a permit or something? Because I got a W-2, so I must have had like it must have been a real job, but yeah, or mowing lawns or whatever too. I was doing that since I was a kid. What I'm saying is this kid's 16. You can figure out how to make $10.
Yeah.
You know, come on.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Mowing lawns is very much a gray economy kind of thing, though.
as in
Any kid can just show up at your door with the lawnmower and ask for $5, and you're like, "Here you go, kid. Don't tell the cops."
I don't even see. I don't quite understand how money works with kids these days, because it was absolutely that I had a paper route, mowing lawns, babysitting. Like those are all child labor jobs. That's how you do it, and I don't my son, I'm embarrassed to say, has never had a job. And most of his friends have never had a job, with a couple of exceptions. And I worry for them.
Yeah. I wouldn't be embarrassed necessarily. I mean, I think, isn't school like way more demanding now than it used to be? No. Where like school runs way like more mountains of homework than we had. We
homeschooled him a lot.
Oh, that's awesome.
Homework sucks, and so no, there's not really the short version is we said this train stops when you go to college, and any amount of discretionary spending money that you want to do in college you have to earn yourself. We're gonna pay for college, which is already more than I got, and then you have to pay for everything else yourself. And right before he went to college, his grandma showed up and gave him a big check to buy a car. But he doesn't have a car, and he doesn't have a license. So he just went off with this big pile of money, which he now has to blow through before he feels the pain of being poor, which I'm impatiently waiting for.
It's tough because on the one hand, it'd be nice to be like, hey, cool, I don't have to work full time to pay rent or something. Because I guess he can be in a dorm in college.
He's in a dorm this year, and then
that's probably part of what you're covering then. Because
yes.
I was gonna say, because there's actually no way anyone could afford back in my day. I went to community college for the first couple of years, and I could actually do what our parents' generation talked about of I had a summer job and then paid for school. I worked 3 days a week during the school year, and that was plenty enough to pay my share of the apartment that we had. There were 3 of us, and it was $1,200 or something, but the master bedroom was twice as big and had its own attached bath. So my share at the end of the month was $330. And so that was totally doable. I imagine now having a job would be completely pointless as an 18-year-old because you can't afford anything, even with a part-time job, other than I guess the grit you get from working a job. I don't know.
And he does like boba, and I'm not paying for it, so he's gonna have to figure something out.
If you got a job at a boba place, all the free boba you can get. So
there you go.
Yeah. I worked at McDonald's for 6 weeks, and that was enough to. Actually, my car broke, which is one of the reasons I stopped working there. But it was also the worst job I had. So.
I briefly worked as a bag boy, and it was a King Soopers combination. Half the time you did bagging, and half the time you went out and collected the carts and brought them back inside. And the thing was, back then, the carts were just everywhere between the parking spots. You corralled them up, you brought them in. That was the part I liked. I hated doing the bagging because I felt very awkward around other humans. I was a huge introverted nerd. I don't want to be here. Don't look at me. I don't want to bag things. But out there, I was just outside in the parking lot. Now, they've taken all those jobs and given them to these little corral carts and force all the customers to put their carts in the corrals. And I'm like, you just took away the best job in the world for teenage Eneash and now force the customers to do it instead.
That said, now that you're parking your car at stores, though, isn't it nice not have to run over carts to find a spot?
I mean, no, because they were always out of the way. They were at the intersection between the spots where you aren't.
Where you totally can't fit your car between 2 other cars when there's a cart there.
No,
I don't know. I run into errant carts all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, people were smart about where they put the carts. They put them in places that were not in the way of cars parking.
See, I feel bad too because then the cart collectors, people instead of take them to the corral, they'll lift them and put them halfway up on the rocks, that divide. Right. And it's great. Now I got to hoist this thing off of here and go drive to the carts.
I was a teenager. I had plenty of energy.
I guess as long as they're having fun.
Yeah.
I walk mine to the thing. I like doing it.
Every time I put a cart in a corral, I'm like, I am subsidizing this company. I'm giving them free labor. This could have been a job for a teenager.
They could have made you carry all the groceries yourself.
I did carry all the groceries myself.
No, you used the cart.
Oh, that's true. I did use the cart.
Yeah. So they're subsidizing your shopping and you're returning the favor.
Okay.
But,
well, did you have other things? Anything else to touch on in this vein?
I think since you have an audience, my one piece of parenting advice, when I had a kid and I didn't know what I was doing, and I knew I was going to have to make it up as I went along, I thought that the thing that made me the most angry when I was growing up was that I had been lied to a lot about lots of things. And I thought, no matter what other parenting mistakes I have made, which have been plenty, I will never lie to my kid. And we never did. We told him that from a very young age. We're never going to lie to you. And no matter what, we didn't lie to him about Santa. We didn't lie to him about anything. That way, when things got tough and he turned into a teenager and we had to start dealing with actual real subjects, we could look him in the eye and say, we've never lied to you, and really mean it. And the amount of trust he has in us and we have in him as a result is kind of the foundation of everything. So I don't like to tell other people their business, but I am imploring everyone to not lie to their kids. And I think you will be happier for it.
Wonderful. Thank you. And also, I agree very much. Stephen, do you have any other follow-up questions or anything?
No, other than that's a really awesome help me out here. What's the word? Anecdote? I don't know. That's a really cool background, because I don't know anyone else who's really done that explicitly.
It's a good inspirational tale to tell people.
Yeah,
Get them actually moving.
Because it's totally, you've proved that it's doable in today's day and age, where you had the legitimate concern of people throwing bricks through your window. Like, how could you be so abusive to your kid? Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, it turns out it works out just fine. Mm-hmm. And getting over the fear of, like, no one cares about your kid. I mean,
no one's out to get your kid.
That's what I meant to say. Yeah, like people will care if they see the kid hurt. Everyone will run to help.
Yep.
People will care in that way, but no one wants to take your kid.
They got their own shitty kids to deal with.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's valuable for people to internalize, and I'm curious, just as curious as the two of you are, to see how things turn out in 10 years when kids who've been sheltered on their smartphones their entire lives.
Kids like Milo will take over the world.
Yeah, exactly.
They're the only agency ones out there.
That's why I'm really excited to see, like, again, in a few years, how they're all doing compared to their peers who were all sheltered through all their schooling and stuff. Yeah, we'll have to do a follow-up and see how that turned out.
Is there anything you want to say, anything you want to plug? Do you have a small business that people should go to?
No, thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Does your son have a Milo.games site where people can download his games?
Yeah, he has like a portfolio site where he puts up the stuff that he's working on. It's great.
What is the site?
It is milo.games.
Okay. Wait, he has games that he sells?
He doesn't sell them, but he would love for people to check out his portfolio.
He is actually in school right now for game design.
I'm all over this. Are you kidding? Awesome. All right, cool. Yeah, we'll put the link in the show notes.
Excellent. If you want to check out some of Milo stuff, see what kids that are raised the right way are doing nowadays at the age of 18, which he has, how many games you said that he's
written over 300. I mean, some of them are dumb and little because he's been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
But this is the only thing he's ever wanted to do, so he's been doing it for a while.
Yeah, they're like, move the cursor to the thing. Congrats, you get a point. As you're learning.
I don't know anybody who did 300 of anything by the age of 18. That's outstanding. Wow. All right. Cool.
We're gonna post a link later.
Excellent. Everybody go to Milo.games and find some amazing games for you to play for a little while.
That's great. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and we are going to pivot to the Less Wrong posts. But first, we have to talk about the Guild of the Rose.
Oh, yeah.
We partner with the Guild of the Rose. We believe in their mission. The Guild of the Rose helps people level up their rationality, learn how to actually apply rationality techniques in real life, all through these awesome online courses with cohorts that you work together with and actually create a bit of a social connection. Today, we have very exciting news.
Well, and as you mentioned with cohorts, it's important to note, like with Jennifer's telling of her kids' upbringing.
Yeah,
it would have been
a cohort of other kids.
It would have been one thing to do alone, but it probably strengthened all of them to do it together. And so there's a reason people work in groups.
Yeah.
Name any strong organization, it's a group.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
You don't just get Superman, you need the Justice League. So, yeah, if you want to join the Justice League, that's theguildoftheRose.com, which is typically an online exclusive organization, except
they are rolling out the very first in real life Meet Space course that is going to be taking place right here in Denver, run by Matt Freeman, one of the founding members of the Guilds of the Rose. He is going to be doing a course on how to be fun at parties.
I'm really excited to see his... I'm going. I'll be attending, and I'm really excited to see how what I'll pick up from it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're both in the alpha for the Guild of the Rose.
Yeah.
The courses, we're all being, none of them have done it before and they're all practicing. But even some of the stuff there I still picked up and still do every day.
Mm-hmm.
David Youssef gave an awesome course on how to properly utilize fashion. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I could wear clothes that fit and they do look a lot better. And I look awesome. Mm-hmm. As opposed to just baggy pants and a way too big shirt, Mm-hmm. So it could be small things like that or big things like, how do I decide which university to go to or something, or how to be fun at parties, which would be really fun. Yeah. I'm curious. I've got my own techniques that I've had to develop because I was not a social person either.
Yeah,
and I'm interested to see if there'll be any intersection there. Right. So
we decided for the first one, take something light and sexy. That
Perfect.
A lot of people would like to go to. If you would like to join and you are in the Denver area, I'm going to be putting a link to a meetup.com page where you can sign up. This is the first time this is being done. We are learning. We are figuring it out, and we are going to be part of rationalist history because eventually this is going to be coming out into the real world for a lot more people.
Great.
Keep your eyes on it. If you want to get in on the very ground floor, go ahead to guildoftheRose.org. You can start taking their online classes and be right in the front of the line for when they come to real space in your town.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well put.
Alrighty, on to the Less Wrong posts.
Sounds good.
I haven't read them.
Oh, okay.
That's totally fine.
I started to, and I didn't, so I'll just sit here and listen if you don't mind.
Do not mind at all.
You can chime in too with anything, with any thoughts or whatever you have with it too.
Less Wrong Post the first.
Wrong questions. Hey, all right. This one's fun.
It was a good one.
Yeah, and it's a 2-minute read. This is near the introduction of the reductionism sequence, and recognizing a wrong question is core to that.
Yes.
And a wrong question, if I'm summarizing this correctly in a sentence, is a question that can't conceivably be answered.
Yeah, because for some reason your mind is cutting against the grain of actual reality.
Right.
You can't answer the questions on your own terms. He says you can only dissolve them by understanding the cognitive algorithm that generated the perception of a question.
I love that he keeps referring to the standard example of the tree falling in the forest. Enosh thinks that if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, it doesn't make a sound, and I think it does. What would it mean for either of us to actually be right?
Right.
He puts here in italics, well, it would have to mean that sound, quote-unquote sound, really means only acoustic vibrations or really means only auditory experiences. Yeah. What it really means.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one form of wrong question.
He says, if this one doesn't work for you, here's a couple other ones where it seems like you can't even possibly answer the question. That's a good cue that it might be a wrong question. One of the questions he put forth was, do I have free will? Another one, which I like, I really like this one. Why does anything exist at all? Like, what would it even mean to have an answer to that question, right?
Yeah. His answer to not the question itself, but to his response to the question is, and no, I don't know the answer to that one, but I can guess one thing based on my previous experience with unanswerable questions. It will not consist of some grand triumphant first cause. The question will go away as a result of some insight as to how my mental algorithms run skew to reality, after which I'll understand that the question itself was wrong from the beginning. Yeah. I tried this with ChatGPT. I asked it just straight up, why does anything exist? And it gave me the bullet points of, here's the philosophical explanation, here's the yada yada, and then I cut and paste the entire post and said, given that, why does anything exist? And it didn't give me any better answers, unfortunately. I thought it would understand the spirit of wrong questions. I didn't like track it back and try and push back with no, this is a wrong question, try to answer it correctly. Yeah. But it tried to answer the question, right? Yeah. Which I guess makes sense. It's
being asked the question. It's trying to be a good little intern.
It's GTP4. It's not gonna be like, you're asking a wrong question. Right. Let me explain to you what really the solution is here. Yeah.
Allow me to lay out these sequences that will cross the inferential gap.
It just wants to help.
Yeah. I love this line, and I don't know if this is the first time this appears in the sequences. I think we've probably seen it before, but again, it's just something that stuck with me a lot. He says, maybe for the first time, maybe again, if I am ignorant about a phenomenon, that is a fact about my state of mind, not a fact about the phenomenon itself. It's really good to keep in mind whenever you run into something that seems mysterious and unknowable. I think the best example for clarifying this in my mind was if you flip a coin but don't look at it, put it like under a cup or something. What is the chances that it's heads? It's 50-50. Because even though there is one real state of the world where it's either heads or tails, so it's 100% one or the other in the real world, the question is a question about your knowledge. Like, the mysteriousness is in my mind, and so it is unknown.
Yeah, mystery exists in reality, or mystery exists in the mind, not in reality.
Yes, the coin is not in a superposition of one or of both of them.
Right. Yeah. No, it's perfect. And I can't remember if that's the first appearance of this or not. I know it appears in Methods of Rationality verbatim as well. So
okay.
It's hard to remember when I first read this, but it's one of those ones that would make a good bumper sticker coffee mug or something.
The last thing I pulled out of here is that he says such questions must be dissolved.
That's what I was going to pull out too.
Yeah. The answer doesn't let you make any new predictions, even in retrospect, and the phenomenon still possesses the same sacred inexplicability that it had at the start. The answer gives you shit.
Right. He ends this post by saying, coming tomorrow, a simple trick for handling wrong questions.
Which brings us to writing a wrong question. I was going to ask if you want to make a guess, but we already read the post, so we know what it is.
I wouldn't have guessed it, actually. I
probably wouldn't have either, no.
I've read this before, but it's been a long time. So if I pose a question at you, like, do we have free will? Mm-hmm. Given that there's so much baggage with basically every term in that question, you can say that's a wrong question and answer instead. There's an actual answerable question that you can just dig out of that, which is, why do I think I have free will?
Yeah.
And that one has a clear path to answer it, right?
I don't even have problems with free will. But I pulled out a couple other of these here that I really liked, where he says, why does time move forward instead of back? The correct answer is, why do I think time moves forward instead of backwards? And why was I born as myself rather than someone else? Think, why do I think I was born as myself rather than someone else? And when you think about it that way, it's much easier to dissolve the question.
It certainly helps illustrate how the original phrasing is completely incoherent.
Yeah.
There's no way I could answer the question, why am I born me and not someone else?
Yeah.
I can answer why I think I am, but all that really does actually is just spotlight how incomprehensible the first question really is.
Right.
The fun thing being an identical twin is I was asked a couple of times, once by like some younger kid of like, how do you know who you are? And all I can think is like, I know who I am. I'm standing right here.
Yeah.
He's over there. That was not a hard question to answer. But why was I born me and not somebody else? Who knows, man? But why do I think that? Honestly, that question's harder to answer than the first, because that question's not a mystery to me. Why was I born me and not somebody else? Yeah. But the first one that you had, why does time move forward, not backward? That one's fun. Yeah. I think it does, because it seems to me that things happen one after the other.
Right.
Is that the actual explanation of the phenomena? Shrug.
It would be impossible for me to think otherwise, because that's how thoughts propagate.
It seems that way. Unless you're Dr. Manhattan. And since none of us are.
Yeah. Well, I did have a couple issues with this post, though, as it went along. He gave the example of why am I wearing socks? You can always resolve any question this way. Why do I think I'm wearing socks? Which goes to, well, I see the light that has bounced off my socks, which makes the impression in my brain, and the light bounced off my socks because there's socks on my feet, and going forward there. So he's like, you can answer the question, why am I wearing socks, by going through a longer chain. But then he goes, why is there a lake in the middle of the desert? Asking, why is there a lake in the middle of the desert may fail if there is no lake to be explained. But why do I perceive a lake in the middle of the desert always has a causal explanation one way or the other. The implication being that either there is a lake there and you're seeing it, or there isn't a lake there but you're seeing a reflection off the atmosphere, etc. to get the lake mirage. I don't think this helps in the least. Because it doesn't tell you whether there is a lake there or not. You'd have to already know that there is or isn't a lake there.
I mean, in the specific case of the desert lake, if you have the luxury of sitting and thinking about it and you're not dying of dehydration, you might notice, deserts don't usually have big lakes. Why is there a lake there?
But sometimes they do. There are oases.
There are. But then you might, if you thought to think to yourself, why do I think there's a lake there? Oh, right, there's mirages. I've heard about those.
Right, but how can you tell from your position whether that is light coming to your eyes from a mirage or light coming to your eyes from an actual oasis?
I mean, I guess you can't without going to check. But the point of it is that the first question might actually just be a wrong question, though. Why is there a lake in the desert? There isn't. That's the answer, right? If it's a mirage. Yeah. Why do I perceive a lake? Well, because either there's a lake or I'm seeing a mirage.
Okay. I see. So it's a dissolving of that as opposed to just assuming that there is a lake right there.
Right. Okay. Why do I think I'm wearing socks? Because I can see them and I put them on and I remember doing them. All of that's true. Mm-hmm. Why do I see the lake? One answer is that you don't. Mm-hmm. And so that's asking the wrong question. Mm-hmm. But the right question is, why do I think I see one? Yeah. And then that way, yeah, you could still go chase it down, but at least you're asking the right question.
Yeah.
You won't be surprised in that case if you don't come across water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you probably still want to chase it down just in case there is a lake there.
Just in case.
Unless it's taking you in the opposite direction of where you think there's probably a well.
Try not to get lost in the desert.
Solid advice. Have one of those maps of the areas that you can explore and don't go past it.
Right. And if some guy who insists that he knows where he's going, but it's been 3 or 4 years, I just started to think, I don't think this guy knows where he's going.
Right.
I made that joke about Moses, right?
I think you did.
Yeah. I stole it from Jim Gaffigan.
Okay.
But his whole thing is 40 years. You think after a while they'll be like, I don't think he knows where he's going.
I mean, the shitty part was that God specifically did that to them on purpose to punish them.
God,
what was it that they did?
He was so pernicious in his punishments.
Yeah, he was really petty.
Yeah. Because they were exiled, but
they escaped from Egypt. I maybe it was the worshipping of the golden calf. No, because they killed all the people that were doing that. I don't remember, but there was some kind of thing they did that he was like, "All right, you guys are going to wander in the desert for 40 years because fuck you." So no matter what, they were going to be wandering for 40 years. They had no choice in the matter.
Well, unless you find yourself in that situation.
Okay,
we've come a little far afield. But.
Don't piss off God is the moral of the story. He also has one thing where he's talking about the free will and dissolving the question, why do I think I have free will? Where he says, where's the free will sensor in your brain, and how does it detect the presence or absence of free will? How does the sensor interact with the sensed event, and what are the mechanical details of the interaction? I kind of think, again, this is bullshit, because, I mean, I do believe in free will, but not in the magical sense. I have a completely different idea of, it is the algorithm is within you, and that is what it means to have free will. The algorithm that decides what to do. But you can say this, like, about any abstract idea.
I actually like that paragraph because it has the line, how would it detect the presence or absence of free will? Because for people who are like, the standard, like, oh no, I believe in the standard definition of free will and that's my thing. It's like, what would it look like if you didn't have that?
Right.
And that isn't a question I think those people have asked themselves. Or how would you notice if you didn't? Does your internal algorithm, would it be able to spot the lack of this?
If you didn't have an internal algorithm, you wouldn't make decisions.
I guess. I mean, you'd still be doing stuff, right?
No.
Okay. So we're working on different... We'll hash this out in a different thing. But,
all right. Like, there's a series of neurons that fire that come to a certain decision, and if they weren't doing that, then there wouldn't be any decision made. Basically, you'd be a corpse.
All right. Well, I mean, I was going to... We'll
some
table
other day.
that. Yeah. It'll be a fun little
I do think it's kind of the bullshit to say that, like, there's an abstract thought or principle or rule, and if there is no way to mechanically detect it by an organ in your brain, then it probably doesn't exist.
I'm trying to think of an example that actually works for. I mean, how do I know I'm conscious? Like, or rather, what is consciousness versus, like, why do I think I'm conscious?
I think it's actually a pretty good one.
Yeah, but, so I'm trying to think of, like, examples that I would be as steadfast against as you are, that you're drawing contention with here, but I can't think of any right off. He does say that if your belief does derive from valid observation of a real phenomena, we will eventually reach that fact if we start tracing the causal chain backwards from your belief.
I mean, that's fair. I do think that there is a series of steps encoded in neurons in your brain that come to decisions based on the inputs in them.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that adequately explains that, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to necessarily, work on a sense organ, I don't think, right?
Right.
It can all be internal. I don't think he is arguing here that it has to be some, well, he does say observed phenomena, but again, you can observe things happening inside your own head with your eyes closed. Again, it doesn't have to be something that you notice out in the world. But then he goes on to say, if what you are really seeing is your own confusion, tracing back the chain of causality will find an algorithm that runs skew to reality, which links to the wrong questions.
Yeah.
Which is nice, because if you're, I'm trying to think of an example. I should have done this because I read these, yesterday or earlier today, thinking of a time that I righted a wrong question by noticing, like, oh yeah, I was actually just confused. I mean, this happens every time, actually, where you think there's some problem with anything mechanical that you're trying to fix, and you do the thing and then it's still broken. I thought I observed this, but I guess I didn't. I observed something else, right?
Like when you were fixing the microphone
yeah,
just before.
Exactly. I tightened the wrong screw because it was wiggly from a secret part underneath it, not from the part that I could see. And I noticed after I'm confused that it's still loose, but whatever, I guess that's it. But yeah, so it's the kind of thing where, I mean, I feel stupid because every time I try to think of like off-the-cuff examples, they're always like really simple, small things like that. But how often do random, interesting things happen? So
very rarely do you have to solve free will in your life.
Yeah, not often.
I like that he leaves us with the idea, the advice that, like, yeah, we're tracing back the chain of causality to find where the algorithm went wrong. And he says, look, you even got a nice concrete place to begin tracing. Your belief sitting there solidly in your mind. Once you have a starting place, you can just follow it.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Well, what less wrong post are we talking about next time?
Well, it looks like we're doing the mind projection fallacy, one of my favorites.
That is a really good one, and one that I have a lot of problem with.
Oh, I think everyone does.
I think maybe me more than most people.
That sounds like the mind projection fallacy, but we'll have to see.
The one after that is the quotation is not the referent. All right, and one final thing before we leave. We always thank a patron because you guys are the reason that we can keep doing this. It really does mean a lot. I mean, I feel a lot of appreciation in a lot of ways. Sometimes people just tell me in real life that they like something, and that feels really good.
I was just going to say I read something recently that put this so well, and then I remembered that I read it on your blog from like a week ago.
Okay.
So the thing is, like, all this stuff is free. We paywall some stuff just for, like bonus content or whatever. Yeah. But we don't do, a bonus episode a month or anything.
Right. It's extras. It's like when we get off on a tangent talking about your cat or something, and then the cat meows and it's cute.
Right. But yeah, so it really is just a an expression of appreciation. So we really
Right.
we do receive that appreciation and love it. So.
And so if someone pays us, we know it's because they appreciate it enough to actually fork over some money. They didn't have to do this.
Right.
Everything that's of substance is out there for everyone.
And this episode's shout out goes to Cass Parr for being our honored patron this episode. All the things we just said, they apply specifically to this episode. So thank you so much.
Very much so. Thank you, Caspar. You are a hero. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks.